Today, Miranda Hobbs walks into a therapy session. Not a real, of course, but imagine if she did. Together, we're going to unpack her emotional patterns, defenses, relationships, and deeper wounds, just like we would in real therapy. You are invited to sit in this session, to observe, reflect, and maybe recognize parts of yourself or people you love in her story. Let's begin. Miranda walks in the therapy room. Maybe she sits down, arms crossed, saying she's fine, just tired and busy. But as we begin to explore, two versions of Miranda start to emerge. On the surface, Miranda appears to be rational, cynical, high-achieving, emotionally guarded, fiercely independent, and proudly feminist, often sarcastic and dismissive of vulnerability, successful in a male-dominated field, and a loyal friend, though often judgmental and reactive. This is the version of Miranda the world sees: sharp, competent, and in control. But therapy doesn't stop at the surface. When we slow down and look underneath, a more complex emotional landscape begins to reveal itself. Beneath that, we might begin to sense deep emotional hunger, fear of dependence and intimacy, a harsh internal critic, shame around softness, need, or emotional longing, unresolved anger towards men, patriarchy, and early childhood caregivers. In therapy, this is where real work begins. Not to pathologize Miranda, but to understand her adaptive strategies that she built to protect herself. Strategies that once served her, but might now be holding her back. As the session continues, we might begin by acknowledging Miranda's impressive accomplishments. She comes in with the pride, and rightfully so. We are not here to shame Miranda for her success, ambition, or feminism. She worked very hard for everything she has, and let's be honest, being a successful lawyer is not a small achievement. Even in 2025, law is still a male-dominated profession, especially in leadership roles and positions of power. Yes, more women have entered the field, but the deeper structures like prestige, expectations, and decision-making still carry a masculine imprint. And don't forget, Sex and the City was filmed in the late 90s and early 2000s. Back then, a woman like Miranda wasn't just ambitious, she was disrupting the entire system. So part of her age, toughness, sarcasm all made sense. It was a form of armor. But this is where therapeutic lens slows down. We shift from admiring the armor to asking what it's protecting. We're not just looking at Miranda as a feminist icon or a career woman. We want to understand who she is beneath the surface, her strength, her defenses, her unspoken fears. Because in doing so, maybe we can even understand the parts of ourselves or the women we know, our mothers, our friends, our partners, our bosses. The confident, competent Miranda we see might actually be a false self, a mask built to survive early emotional disappointments. Her true self might be buried under years of pushing, proving, and protecting. And her feminism, sometimes it feels less of a worldview and more like a shield, guarding a much younger part of her that was led down by men. Part that learned early on that being smart and sharp was the only way to stay safe. Came to believe that emotional needs make a woman foolish, weak, and dependent. So here in the session, we might pause and gently ask, what would it cost you to soften in front of someone? What does being soft feel like in your body? As the session deepens, we begin to explore places where Miranda distances herself, not just from others, but from her own emotional needs. Miranda often mocks vulnerability in others, like Charlotte's romantic idealism. But if we look closer, her own behavior reveals a different story. There is a quiet, hidden longing beneath her sharpness. We see it in her on-again, off-again relationships with Steve, in her emotional overwhelm during pregnancy and early motherhood, and in her constant ambivalence about commitment. It's as if one part of herself desperately wants to be held, chosen, and fully known, while another part shuts it all down when it gets too close. like pulling the plug on her own emotional oxygen. In the therapy room, we might name it as a split between the competent adult and the abandoned child she once was. Out of all four friends, Miranda might actually be the most sensitive and fragile on the inside, and often in life we see this pattern. The people who seem the toughest are ones compensating for deep vulnerability. Miranda is so afraid of being hurt, let down, or abandoned that she builds this thick wall around herself. And one of her main defenses is cynicism. But that fragility also shows up in very touching human ways. She is actually a wonderful friend, often the one who shows up in the hardest moments. And she's also the one who seems to need her friends the most, even if she doesn't always admit it. When Carrie was planning to move to Paris with Alexander Petrovsky, Miranda's reaction wasn't just judgment. It was fear of losing deep emotional bond. And Miranda doesn't handle separation well. There's this beautiful moment when she buys her new apartment, and one of the first things that she unpacks was a photo of four of them, and she gently places it on a fireplace. It's such a small and quiet gesture, but it says so much. Beneath all the independence and sarcasm, Miranda is someone who deeply values connection, perhaps even more than the others. Sometimes the ones who push love away are the ones who crave it the most. They just never learned how to trust that it would stay. In therapy, control is never just control. It's often a trauma response. And with Miranda, it becomes crystal clear. Miranda's sharp logic, dry sarcasm, and career-focused mindset aren't just personality traits, they are tools of control. They help her manage the world that deep down feels unpredictable and emotionally risky. The more she can control her environment, the less she has to feel the chaos within. But when life breaks through, which it always does, like falling in love with Steve, facing an unexpected pregnancy, or losing her mother, we see that control starts to crack, and beneath it we see anxiety, shame, and withdrawal. This is often the moment in therapy where real work begins, when the armor slips and something real gets to emerge. The strong exterior begins to shake, and the emotional part of her that she usually hides rushes forward, unprepared and unprotected. One of the clearest examples of Miranda's need for control comes when she tells her friends that she proposed to Steve. It wasn't a romantic gesture or a tearful confession. She says that she proposed to him over $3 beers. And when Charlotte tears up, Miranda instantly shuts it down. "Don't cry, you're freaking me out." She insists that she doesn't need a big wedding. No dress, no pictures, no bridesmaids. Just something simple and something small. But of course, it is a big deal. The whole scene says so much. Even in front of her closest friends, Miranda has to downplay and control the emotional significance of such a major life event. Because to feel too much, even in love, is still a threat to her sense of safety. Miranda often mocks women who lose themselves in their relationships. But if we listen closely, it sounds less like a judgment but more like a projection, a fear that she might lose herself too, that love might unravel the identity that she's built so carefully over the years. There is a deep internal conflict here, a fear that love might make her small, soft, and invisible. A fear that she'll become dependent like her mother, or like women that she spent years trying not to resemble. A fear that loving someone means surrendering control, and with it the armor that she lived inside for too long. So she stays guarded, she leads with sarcasm, she controls the story. Here's the therapeutic question. Can you stay present in the moments that you don't control without shutting down? And there's a Gestalt experiment that we can do. We could invite Miranda to a dialogue between two inner voices. The fierce feminist who protects her and the vulnerable woman who just wants to be seen and held. At this stage of therapy, we might begin to explore Miranda's relationship to care, loss, and emotional receiving, the softer parts of herself that she often avoids. When Miranda's mother dies, we see a moment of raw emotion and discomfort. She wants the connection, but she doesn't know how to receive it. Her journey into motherhood is also marked by guilt, control, and fear of inadequacy. It's like she is mothering without having ever been mothered in a way that felt safe. For Miranda, it would be very useful to explore how she relates to emotional giving versus receiving, and how it connects to her attachment template. Let's finally talk about Steve. In therapy room, we would inevitably ask, why Steve? And the answer would take us deep into Miranda's unconscious patterns. At first glance, Miranda and Steve seem like total opposites. She's sharp, decisive, and successful. He is emotionally open, but often irresponsible, childlike, and passive. And it makes you question, why would someone like Miranda, who is so driven and independent, choose someone like Steve? But in therapy and in real life, we often see that this kind of pairing is not a mistake. People unconsciously choose each other to reenact familiar emotional patterns from childhood. Not because they want to suffer, but because a part of them is still trying to solve something that was unsolvable. It's like their wounded child is trying to find closure through the relationship. Maybe Miranda's father was someone emotionally mature, unreliable, and checked out like Steve. And maybe Steve grew up with a mother who was strong, bossy, and always took charge just like Miranda. In fact, when we see Steve's mother later in the series, it's fascinating how much she even looks like Miranda. A strong mother figure that makes all decisions, takes control, and leaves very little space for others to emotionally grow. This is kind of a Velcro fit. Opposites that attach through a shared pain is something that therapists see all the time. And that's exactly the dynamic we see in their relationship. Miranda ends up mothering Steve, and Steve behaves like a helpless son. Do you remember that scene where Miranda tries to buy Steve an expensive suit? That doesn't feel like a gift between equals. It really feels like a mother dressing up her son. Two Mirandas wouldn't work. Two Steves wouldn't work either. But together they click like a Velcro. Opposites, yes, but perfectly shaped to attach to each other's unresolved pain. And even though their relationship is full of conflict, resentment, and unmet needs, they keep coming back to each other. They complain, they pull away, they talk about breaking up, they even break up, but something always pulls them back. Why? Because on deep unconscious level, both of them are getting something they know. Everyone complains, but deep down, they are all okay with how things are. In therapy, we would name this for what it is, a familiar pain mistaken for love. We see this all the time in real life. Couples stuck in familiar, painful dynamics that they say they want to escape, but they don't. Because underneath the frustration, there's something tragically comforting in the familiar dance, even if it hurts. As our session with Miranda winds down, we're left with something soft and important, a question. What would happen if Miranda stopped being so capable, just for a minute? If she let someone see the parts of herself that are tired, scared, and longing? If she didn't have to lead with sarcasm, control, or perfection? Miranda is very strong, but sometimes that strength is an armor. In therapy, the work would be about helping her feel emotions in her body, not just analyzing them in her head, to soften the rigidity without losing her independence, to explore the parts of herself that she disowns in others, like softness, need, and vulnerability, and to build trust in emotional intimacy, even if it feels terrifying. Miranda isn't just the tough one. She is also the most sensitive, the most easily hurt, and the most afraid of being abandoned, which is exactly why she built such high walls. And maybe you recognize a part of Miranda in yourself or in someone you love. And by the way, if you enjoyed this deep dive, we have already explored Samantha, Charlotte, and Carrie and Big in therapy, each one with their unique defenses, wounds, and paths to healing. Go check them out if you haven't yet. And by the way, this time I thought it would be nice to finally introduce myself. My name is Christina and I am a psychologist. And this channel, Shrink Happens, is something that we co-create with my good friend and partner, Anastasia. She is the channel's creative producer and a creative mind behind the beautiful thumbnails that you all keep noticing. And she helps to shape each video with ideas, feedback, and care. You only see me on the screen, but Shrink Happens is really a team effort. And we're so happy to have you here with us. Thank you for being here, and until next time, take care.